What is happening, Nico my cousin? Today I'm going to do an educational video and tell you all about every president's favorite video game. George Washington was the first president, so obviously his favorite video game would have to be the first game ever made. Everyone say it with me. Mario Brother for the Nintendo NES. This is the first video game. Everybody knows this. John Adams. Nobody really talks about this guy. He had pretty unremarkable tastes in games. His favorite game was Mario Kart 8. It's a fun game to play with friends, so that was a pretty safe and politically inoffensive opinion for the time. Thomas Jefferson was one of the presidents who owned slaves, so it makes a lot of sense that his favorite game would have been Pokemon Red. James Madison's favorite game was Smash Ultimate, and he was actually the person responsible for ensuring that the White House had Ethernet, which made the rest of the government run more smoothly by proxy. Supposedly. James Monroe claims that Smash is also his favorite game, although mostly he would just keep pulling out the Ethernet cable because he just mashed buttons and lost. He was fully convinced that every single character was broken except for his main. The history books never specified who his main was, but you already know it was like Marth or some shit. John Quincy Adams, not John Adams, different person. He likes Super Mario Sunshine. He said, and I quote, "Super Mario Sunshine is leaps and bounds ahead of Galaxy because the level design encourages exploration. It wants the player to experiment with its mechanics and has a much higher skill ceiling as a result. I must say, John Quincy Adams seems like a very wise man. He was president for a reason." Andrew Jackson. Wikipedia says his legacy was controversial and polarizing. He was kind of like the Last of Us 2 of presidents, if you will. Martin Van Buren's favorite game was Yoshi's Story for the Nintendo 64. He likes Yoshi. William Henry Harrison's favorite game was Metal Wolf Chaos by From Software. He thought that if he became president, he would get to pilot a giant armored core like the president does in the game, and then, when he got to the White House and all the senators and advisors started asking him about boring political shit, he started putting the pieces together and realized way too late that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. John Tyler. John Tyler actually didn't play video games. He was the first and only president to admit that he had never played a video game and never intended to. It is still unknown why he felt this way, but one conspiracy theory suggests that he saw a Let's Play of Saints Row 5 and was so disturbed by what he saw that he never wanted to be anywhere near a video game for the rest of his life. James K. Polk. I'll be honest, I really didn't know this guy was a real president. I honestly believe they just made him up to mess with me because they figured I'm Canadian and I wouldn't figure it out. I think he would have liked Donkey Kong Country though. Zachary Taylor. I thought this guy was like a pop singer or some shit. That sounds like the made up name of some Teen Choice Awards motherfucker from that one Family Guy episode. Guy like this? Definitely Crash Bandicoot for the Wii. Wilfrid Laurier was a fan of Rayman 2, but only the Dreamcast version. He refused to play any other version. Millard Fillmore also liked Rayman 2, but he wasn't picky at all about which version. He even played the PlayStation version that's missing half the levels. I think this might have been the guy who called me brain damaged in my Rayman 2 PS1 video. Franklin Pierce was a big fan of GTA 5. He always played as Franklin because his name is Franklin, so every time they addressed Franklin in the game, he'd go like, yeah, as though the game was talking to him and not the Franklin in the game. James Buchanan. This guy's favorite game any day of the week was Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. It's probably just a coincidence, but he's considered by many scholars to be the worst president, just straight up. Abraham Lincoln was most famous for ending slavery in the United States, so his favorite game is probably whatever the opposite of Pokemon is. I've done a lot of research on what that game would be and figured that the closest match is Conker's Bad Fur Day. Andrew Johnson, not Andrew Jackson, different guy. He likes Portal 2, although he still hasn't beaten it. He just does the infinite portal trick and stares at it for hours. Ulysses S. Grant was a general in the Union Army. His tactical advantage was that he was insanely good at Tetris, which you wouldn't think those skills would be transferable to military tactics, but somehow it gave him all the skills he needed. Rutherford B. Hayes' favorite game was Blinks for Xbox. All of his closest advisors said that he should seriously consider playing an actually good 3D platformer to be taken seriously on the world stage. But he just kept saying, no, 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 this is a 4D platformer, which thankfully the rest of the government thought was ridiculous and they voted unanimously to take away his Xbox. James A. Garfield, well this one's easy to remember. This guy likes Garfield Kart for the Nintendo 3DS. Chester A. Arthur, all this guy played was Honey Pop. Grover Cleveland, this guy likes Witcher 3. Fucking normie. Benjamin Harrison said on record that his favorite game was Fallout New Vegas, but a lot of people find the circumstances of this claim to be suspicious, and that it's more likely that he just watched that H-Bomber guy video and repeated everything from the video like he came up with it himself. Grover Cleveland was elected a second time, and by that point he had a change of heart and realized that Cyberpunk really was the better game all along. William McKinley, this guy's favorite game was actually a ROM hack called Shotgun Mario 64. He loved that game right up until Nintendo had him shot in real life for playing unlicensed games. Theodore Roosevelt's favorite game was Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! If you know anything about Roosevelt, you'll know that he was very competitive and he could box. The dude would knock you out if you said something stupid. He killed a moose with his bare hands. Not even actual Mike Tyson would fuck with this guy. William Howard Taft. Wikipedia makes special note of the fact that this was the last president to have facial hair, so his favorite game was undoubtedly a mustache-related game like Wario Land 4 for the Game Boy Advance. Woodrow Wilson. Under his presidency, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote in elections, which means his favorite game was probably Miss Pac-Man or something. Warren G. Harding loved Undertale, but not at all for the right reasons. Calvin Coolidge. This guy was so cool, everybody loved him, everybody wanted to be just like him. All he played was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and they would just be watching the screen in awe of his abilities. His records are still being studied by video game analysts. They literally have no idea how he was this good. Herbert Hoover. What kind of name is Herbert? I bet he played Bubsy. Franklin D. Roosevelt was a wartime president, so his favorite game was probably Pikmin 2. Truman's favorite game was Wolfenstein 3D. The first thing he did when he got into office was do a world record speed run of Wolfenstein. 2.5 weeks later, Hitler was dead in real life. Coincidence? I hardly think so. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Well, this one's easy. What's the D stand for? Dark Souls 2. He likes 2. John F. Kennedy. Well, this one's easy. What's the F stand for? Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. JFK navigated the US through one of the most treacherous periods of history, and what should have been a hopeful and inspiring legacy was unfortunately overshadowed by his assassination. Everyone was so shocked and horrified at this tragic news, and playing through Shadow of the Erdtree made me feel pretty much the same. Lyndon Johnson was vice president to Kennedy, so he was like a backup president. His favorite game was Borderlands 2, which makes sense because that's the backup game that I play when I don't feel like playing anything else. Richard Nixon. His favorite game is Animal Crossing for the GameCube. He never played the new ones. He said they were too gay. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that, but Gerald Ford likes Kirby's Avalanche. Okay, I like that game too. Jimmy Carter. This man is the oldest living president. This man is old, like old. He is barely clinging to life. He's looking like a friggin' re-dead out here. His favorite game is Dead Rising. Jimmy, isn't that a little bit on the nose? Ronald Reagan. This guy's favorite game was Red Dead Redemption 2. Pretty much he just skipped all the cutscenes and then rode around on the horsey shooting at random shit. Whenever he failed a mission, he'd just skip it because Rockstar currently designs games so that you can just skip most of the gameplay, and this is how they make the best-selling games of all time. George H.W. Bush was a man who thought GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64 was the best FPS ever made. Honestly, he was just blinded by nostalgia. Everybody knows this game is diarrhea shit that runs at 3 frames per second. Bill Clinton always understood that Call of Duty was just the better game. Always was, it always will be. George W. Bush, this guy's favorite game is Metal Gear Solid 2, although that's not because the game is good, but instead because he thinks the events of Metal Gear are real. And I don't mean that in an allegorical, metaphorical sense like Kojima predicted the future or whatever. I mean, he thinks that Revolver Ocelot, Solid Snake, and Big Boss are literally real people who actually exist in real life. You know that scene in Snake Eater where Lyndon Johnson shakes Big Boss's hand? He thinks that's like archive footage from a televised event.
The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. Of Ukraine.
My palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, vomit on my sweater already, mom's spaghetti.
Barack Obama ran his campaign on hope and change, and he repeated these sentiments so often that everyone started calling him the hopey, changey guy. His favorite game is Paper Mario Color Splash, and I hope that he changes his opinion because that is not a good video game.
Nobody loves video games more than I do. China.
Donald Trump. Now everybody knows this guy is a natural businessman, and as such I assumed his favorite game would be something like Lemonade Tycoon or maybe Sim City or something where you build buildings and sell a bunch of shit. After that, my next guess was probably like WWE 2K15 since he was actually in that.
I've heard for a long time that that's not your hair.
And after that, my next guess was Overwatch because he's friends with XQC. But I asked him myself, and he actually said his favorite game was Ocarina of Time, and that took me completely by surprise. I was like, really? He said that when he was in a really dark place, he would just lock himself in a closet with his Nintendo 3DS and he would just play Zelda for hours, and that it was a really great escape from all the pressures of being president. It got him through some of the lowest moments of his life and he cherishes it deeply, and I was like, damn dude, yeah, I get it. I really get it. And I hope for Kamala's sake that she likes Majora's Mask because that really is the better game, let's be real. Joe Biden. All this guy plays is Katamari Damacy. He's really good at it too. He gets like this glazed look in his eye and he just goes nuts on that game. He is like speedrunner level. I don't know how he does it. I don't even know what he's doing, and I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. And there it is. There you have it. That is every president's favorite video game. Every single part of this video was fact-checked and verified by an independent group of politically non-affiliated Goombas and peer-reviewed by Donkey Kong himself, so rest assured that this is all true and correct. Now join me next week where I will be finding out how much monster energy it takes to kill myself.
Bing 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 bong. Bing 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 bong. Bing 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 bong. Bing 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 bong. Bing 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 bong. Bing 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 bing.